The movements for independence, whether against apartheid or against colonialism, Unisa somewhat provided opportunities for leaders to study. Also, they're not monolithic in their political stance. They come from different commitments, and that's what is the asset at Unisa. We're not just channeling specific ideology, but we give the critical knowledge so that people can make constructive choices that are consonant with how they imagine their roles in society.
If we don't do anything, no one else will do it. And it is us who need to make the change. It is us who need to make the difference.
We went to work at the quarry. Hard labor, intensively hard labor, was meted out by the warders. In winter, they would provide something that was akin to a jersey, but really very skimpy. So we had to work during the day. And only when we come back at around 4 o'clock from the work camps would we be allowed to have dinner, go back into your different cells, and study from 6 until 8 o'clock, because at 8 the lights went off. So some of us stole time, and many stole time because the windows, although they were barred, would let in some moonlight. It was not infrequent to find people fighting for a piece of the moonlight so they can do their assignments with Unisa. Remember, as a prisoner, there were 4 classifications, A, B, C, D. We were D class, that means the worst possible offenders. But after 6 months or a year, we were told that the prison laws will allow us to study, those of us who have the ability. The prison was not going to provide the facility nor the funding. So I had meant to continue to be, hopefully, a successful musician. The University of South Africa then offered a certificate in theory of music. So might I say, I still have that diploma hanging at my house because I passed with flying colors, and my certificate was given to me in Afrikaans. And you know, I wasn't very spreken in Afrikaans, but nonetheless, I valued that certificate. And many of my colleagues that they were studying for a variety of other qualifications because of the open and large and broad opportunity that the university provided even during those times.
Gives us a sense of pride that we are leading in this university. It means that the challenge is there, that there are big shoes to fill, but also it also pushes us to ensure that this university reaches the heights that it's supposed to reach.
The movements for independence, whether against apartheid or against colonialism, Unisa somewhat provided opportunities for leaders to study. Also, they're not monolithic in their political stance. They come from different commitments, and that's what is the asset at Unisa. We're not just channeling specific ideology, but we give the critical knowledge so that people can make constructive choices that are consonant with how they imagine their roles in society.
If we don't do anything, no one else will do it. And it is us who needs to make the change. It is us who needs to make the difference.
We went to work at the quarry. Hard labor, intensively hard labor, was meted out by the warders.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Sanbonani. We'd like to welcome you to the 4th Simiso Nkwanyana Memorial Lecture. My name is Professor Puleng Sakhalo. I'm the Chief Albert Mutuli Research Chair at Unisa, and I'm going to be leading the program tonight. And alongside me, I have my colleagues who are going to be assisting us with the sign language interpretation. Ms. Sandile Mgadi here with me, and she's joined by her colleague and sit back as we watch the university's corporate video.
The movements for independence, whether against apartheid or against colonialism, Unisa somewhat provided opportunities for leaders to study. Also, they're not monolithic in their political stance. They come from different commitments, and that's what is the asset at Unisa. We're not just channeling specific ideology, but we give the critical knowledge so that people can make constructive choices that are consonant with how they imagine their roles in society.
If we don't do anything, no one else will do it. And it is us who needs to make the change. It is us who needs to make the difference.
We went to work at the quarry. Hard labor, intensively hard labor, was meted out by the warders. In winter, they would provide something that was akin to a jersey, but really very skimpy. So we had to work during the day. And only when we come back at around 4 o'clock from the work camps would we be allowed to have dinner, go back into your different cells, and study from 6 until 8 o'clock, because at 8 the lights went off. So some of us stole time, and many stole time because the windows, although they were barred, would let in some moonlight. It was not infrequent to find people fighting for a piece of the moonlight so they can do their assignments with Unisa. Remember, as a prisoner, there were 4 classifications, A, B, C, D. We were D class, that means the worst possible offenders. But after 6 months or a year, we were told that the prison laws will allow us to study. Those of us who have the ability, the prison was not going to provide the facility nor the funding. So I had meant to continue to be, hopefully, a successful musician. The University of South Africa then offered a certificate in theory of music. And might I say, I still have that diploma hanging at my house because I passed with flying colors, and my certificate was given to me in Afrikaans. And I wasn't very sprekend in Afrikaans, but nonetheless, I valued that certificate. And many of my colleagues that were there were studying for a variety of other qualifications because of the open and large and broad opportunity that the university provided even during those times.
Gives us a sense of pride that we are leading in this university. It means that the challenge is there, that there are big shoes to fill, but also it also pushes us to ensure that this university reaches the heights that it's supposed to reach.
And I would like to acknowledge the university management, all the members who are here present. And I would also like to acknowledge the Nkwanyana family, all of you distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, good evening. So we gather here tonight not only to remember Simiso Nkwanyana, but to honor the fire he carried a fire of conviction, of courage, and of uncompromising dedication to justice. Simiso stood for the working class, for students, for the poor, and the marginalized. He believed that the struggle for education was inseparable from the struggle for economic justice and economic freedom. He reminded us that transformation was not a slogan, but a lived reality that had to reach the hostels, the rural villages, and the informal settlements. He stood for a lot, ladies and gentlemen. So today, as we honor him, may we reflect on how we can collectively contribute towards ensuring that his vision remains alive until we see a just future. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Unisa as a university has got 10 catalytic niche areas. And these catalytic niche areas have been strategically identified and designed to drive research, innovation, and societal impact while strengthening the university's academic and global presence. So let me tell you, in March 2026, Unisa acquired an airport. The first university in the continent to do this. The airport is a 20-hectare facility that will serve as a live training ground for students in aeronautics, drone technology, and advanced digital systems. According to the Business Insider, the airport acquisition did not arrive as a bolt from the blue. As things stand, ladies and gentlemen, Africa faces a severe worsening shortage of qualified aviation professionals, and the numbers leave little room for comfort. So the acquisition directly addresses the continent's critical aviation skills shortage, and we're told that Africa needs over 23,000 new pilots and 24,000 new technicians by 2044. And therefore, Unisa's facility is going to be providing the hands-on infrastructure to begin closing that gap at scale. We will not have to, hopefully, travel and fly to Europe to be able to get to another African country because there's no direct flight from the continent. This year, 2026, Unisa achieved second position nationally for conference proceedings outputs and for articles publications, climbing from the 6th position nationally. I think that requires a hand of applause. Outputs increased considerably, reflecting the university's expanding engagement in academics exchange and research dissemination. This achievement, ladies and gentlemen, demonstrates Unisa's ability to contribute to critical scholarly debates, share new insights, and strengthen its influence within the broader research community. This achievement also reflects the depth of quality and the quality of Unisa's research and its growing contribution to knowledge production in South Africa and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, this progress and accolades became possible under the leadership of our visionary principal and vice-chancellor, a pioneer whose footsteps echo possibility, a woman who is a champion of justice, whose leadership has turned milestones into melodies. I am almost tempted to ask that we all rise to honor the woman under whose leadership Unisa rose in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings and the Shanghai Rankings, with 20 of our academics being ranked in the global 2%. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Unisa's Principal and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Puleng Linkabula, to offer us the welcoming remarks.
Sanibonani. Ninjani? Mina ngiyaphila. Bonga uNkulunkulu. We always say there's a Puleng who is end. There's also a Puleng who is end. So thank you very much, Professor Sekgalo, the Chief Albert Luthuli, Chair, a trailblazer in your own right, and a person who has helped the University of South Africa to crafting partnership models with the global north that are just, that respect the knowledges from the continent, and that ensure that Unisa is at the center. Can you give her a round of applause? Colleagues, the theme of tonight's lecture, the fourth Simiso Nkwanyana Memorial Lecture, is Land as a Catalyst for Rural Economic Development in South Africa. I dare say in the continent and in the world. And we couldn't be more honored, if not fortunate, to have a person who has been traversing the land question from her time as a young activist in the ecumenical movement, in the political movement, especially the African National Congress, but also in government as a minister. Can I request that we give a round of applause to the Honorable Madam Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, Metoko Didiza. Here in KZN, don't we have ululations? I didn't hear. Thank you. Thank you very much. Program Director, Professor Sekgalo, thank you very much. Our esteemed keynote speaker for today, the Honorable Toko Didiza, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa, but also an alumnus of the University of South Africa. I would like to interject the table of precedence by telling you that we graduated on the same day with Her Honorable Toko Didiza at some point. When I got my doctoral degree, I kept on looking towards her because she was also graduating on that day. And it was a great honor to have graduated with a minister at the time. So I don't know if you remember that, Madam Speaker, but it's always an honor. It's a historical moment that I'll not forget. Colleagues, let me recognize Mr. Satlulelo Lezupe, the chairperson of Simiso Nkwanyana Center for Alternative Ideas, Ms. Nontoboke Notemba Boyce, Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Legislature, Mr. James Ngumalo, the ANC KZN PTT Coordinator, Ms. Liana Grisel Joubert, the Acting Chief Financial Officer, Professor Opa Mashile, the Acting Deputy Registrar responsible for the region, Dr. Joyce Mieza, the Regional Director of KwaZulu-Natal Region, Dr. Chivase, the Acting Vice Principal responsible for teaching, learning, and engaged scholarship and student support, Mr. Kaye Nkwanyana, the other members of the family and friends of Simiso Nkwanyana in attendance here tonight. Don't worry, colleagues. You know our regional tongues sometimes tease us. One of my professors used to say, the legends, and Professor Modi will attest to that, even though he comes from this. He said the people from Eastern Cape, when they say embedded, they say EMB, EDD, ED. So if you heard me tongue twisting, forgive me. It is my singular privilege and honor to welcome you to the 4th Simiso Nkwanyana Memorial Lecture this evening. It is truly an honor for the University of South Africa to have partnered with the family and to honor you. Can I request you to stand up, colleagues? Can you give the partner, the wife, the person who was also the flame and the anchor towards Simiso Nkwanyana's life, work, and advocacy, his wife. Can I request you to stand up so that you can see it? We will stand up. Can I hear a little bit more? Thank you very much. We honor you and appreciate the work and the commitment that you continue to demonstrate in support of this iconic leader that many youth and young adults in our society take heed from, and his advocacy, whether on expanding access, agitating for the national financial aid system, looking at how financial services systems would enable access and success in higher education, but also in social justice system. We gather under the theme, Land as a Catalyst for Rural Economic Development in South Africa, a theme that goes straight into the heart of our national consciousness and our unfinished business of liberation project. Land is not merely a factor of production. It is the locus of identity. It is memory. It is our spiritual belonging. It is our generational wealth. It is also how we remember that we are inextricably bound as humanity to one another, but also to other creatures. And therefore, to talking about land in a democratic environment is to asking these deep questions about who we are, our ontology, how we think about our relationship with one another, how we address the questions that bedevil our society of pollution, of climatic changes, of ecological degradation, or the inability of people who were once the doyens of food production in our societies, of those who asserted food sovereignty and food security, of those who cultivated food in the small scales but also in the large vistas of the farms in our society, must be asking, what does the land mean in the current context, not just historically? Have we as Africans really taken seriously the stewardship of the land as an important imperative in the economic development and transformation of our society? We are hoping through this lecture, these critical discussions will arise, will be wrestled with, and new insights will emerge which enrich the continuing lessons, learnings, advocacy, agitation, acquisitions, but also how we relive our lives with the land. The historical arc of dispossession in this country, codified by the Natives Land Act of 1913, systematically stripped Black South Africans of their territorial and economic foundations. That act, alongside subsequent discriminatory legislations, created a spatial and economic architecture of exclusion that we continue to dismantle 3 decades into democracy. So Blackie, in his seminal work, Native Life in South Africa, captured the devastating impact of that legislation with searing clarity. He wrote, and I wish to quote, "Awakening on Friday morning, June 20th, 1913, South African native found himself or herself not actually a slave, but a pariah in the land of his or her birth." These were the words of Blackie in 1916. These words, written over a century ago, remain a haunting indictment of the system that reduced black people to mere strangers in their own land. Blackie documented how the act rendered black South Africans landless, how they became mobile only along public roads with no rights or title to farmlands through which they trekked. The pariahdom he described was not merely a legal status, it was an existential condition of landlessness in one's own land. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Development Plan reminds us that inclusive rural development is non-negotiable if we are to overcome poverty and inequality. The NDP envisages a South Africa where land reform contributes meaningfully to employment, food security and food sovereignty, broad-based economic participation, and the flourishing of humanity. Yet we must honestly confront the fact that progress that has been made is important, but more needs to be done, and the pace of restitution and redistribution will require acceleration so that we ensure that those who were marginalized do not continue raising similar questions they would have raised prior to our democracy. Globally, the land question has acquired renewed urgency. Climate change, food systems volatility, and geopolitical instabilities have elevated the land and agrarian reform to the center of international development discourses. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 2 on zero hunger and Goal 15 on life on land, underscore that sustainable rural economies are indispensable globally as they are here at home. South Africa, as a member of the global community, cannot isolate its rural development agenda from these planetary challenges. Our rural areas are not peripheral backwaters. They are frontiers of opportunities, reservoirs of cultural heritage, critical buffers against climate-induced urban distress. As we know, the late Simiso Nkwanyana was very committed to rural development and agrarian reform. He wasn't just interested in them as discourses, but also the practice and the praxis of land as an empowering notion and idea about ourselves. And he didn't just reflect on the land, he made it important that he was a critical actor, agent, the power change maker in our society, even at a young age, that he was advocating for these matters. This lecture tonight is meant to honor him. This founding member of Unisa First Student Representative Council in 1996. Can I request those who were with Simiso Nkwanyana as the student leaders, I've seen them. If they don't want, one of them is at the back table. I've been looking. But also all other progressive student leaders that this university who have led in this university, can I request you to stand up? Colleagues, you can see they have a few highlights, not many highlights. Can you give them, can you please stand so that we give you your round of applause? Thank you. These are some of the first student leaders in a democratic dispensation that was hard won. So thank you very much for being a partner, a friend, a comrade, and a colleague of Simiso in his quest for social change. Congratulations. Can you give them another round? As we celebrate him, we recognize that he was a principal leader with formidable support base in KwaZulu-Natal, but also the University of South Africa within the national boundaries. He was also the provincial secretary of the South African Communist Party at his untimely passing in 2003 at a very young age of 31 years. He was a leader who understood that transformation is not bureaucratic exercise, but a moral and political struggle. His generation fought for Unisa that reflected the rich diversity of our nation and served the emancipatory interest for Unisa that reflected the importance for a plan, a program that was optimum, which were not only about institutional reforms. Their agitation, their social transformation depended on what they called the 7-point plan or program optimum. These were blueprints for the university that would be the university of the land and the university for the people. In 2019, Unisa named Durban Regional Hub after him. This colleague, in my view, a permanent monument to his enduring legacy, must always be celebrated. Can you celebrate Unisa for recognizing its leaders? As the Principal and Vice Chancellor and Management Committee of the University and all epistemic communities of the University, we are deeply conscious that our institutional identity, the African University Shaping Futures in the Service of Humanity, carries a particular responsibility towards development. Our open distance, multimodal university is uniquely positioned to ensuring that we become a partner to our society, to transforming our society, to understanding the critical questions that society asks as it is our students, and to be effective in the agitation for sustainable development, small enterprise development, as well as transnational development enterprises, effective local and global governance, particularly because Simiso represented this very well in his young life, including in his work in the varied areas that he advocated for. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are profoundly privileged to have the Honorable Speaker, Mayor Tokodidiza, who will deliver the important lecture. She brings not only the parliamentary stature, but deep, lived experiences and leadership in grappling with the land and agrarian reforms in our country, in giving opportunities for those countries that still wrestle with these questions, the benchmarks, the ideation, in being the interlocutor for creating knowledge systems and knowledge hubs that tackle these important areas, in being the first person to launch the Charlotte Manya Maikeke when no one knew anything about that foundation. This is a history I'm telling you because she was the first one to address it at the University of Free State, where I happened to have been working. if this history is not known, Honorable Speaker, it must be known, because people don't know how their institutions evolve, and people don't protect institutions that are transformative and that build society, and therefore it must always be in our consciousness, colleagues, to remember the builders, the pathfinders, those who are resilient and those who necessitate and invite others to participating in the transformative agenda. Welcome to Unisa. The Unisa that Professor Sekgalo has informed you is rising and rising, is a partner to our society in addressing the critical questions that demand us to answer the questions that critical scholars like Simiso Nkwanyana would have raised. Welcome to the home of leaders, the home of liberation heroes, the home of leaders like Togo Didiza herself, the university that continues to shaping futures, an innovative university where its epistemic community will contest one another robustly, but will consistently come together to ensuring that we bequeath our society the resources of knowledge, research, innovation, access, success, and the advancement of our society through education. Welcome to the Simiso Lecture. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that's enough. Please let us give our Principal and Vice Chancellor a resounding round of applause. Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chancellor, for not just welcoming us, but for beautifully and brilliantly setting the tone for tonight, asking critical questions, and reminding us of what Simiso Nkwanyana stood for. Ladies and gentlemen, please now allow me to invite Mr. Siyathokoza Nkwanyana, who is the President of the National Student Representative Council, NSRC, here at Unisa, to come forward and offer his message of support. Let's please welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I thought there were student leaders in the house, not even a song, Nyana, a struggle song to start. Former SG, assist, please. Amandla. No, thank you very much. The room seems to be alive. We're young people. When we're young, we must show that we have energy. Somlomo kazwelonke, shamthetho kazwelonke, umama uThoko Didiza siyabulisa. The Vice Chancellor and the Principal of the University of South Africa, Prof. Linkampula, the Executive Management, umndeni wakozikode, onkwanyana umndeni wasekhaya kozikode konkwanyana. Siyabingelela. Regional Management of KwaZulu-Natal and other regions that are here, the Student Representative Council of KwaZulu-Natal, student leaders, former student leaders, distinguished guests, ngithanda nje ukubingelela ngegama lika Simiso Nkwanyana. It is an honor and a privilege to deliver this message of support on behalf of the Unisa Student Representative Council. Our point of entry to express our appreciation to the University of South Africa for hosting this important occasion, which allows us to reflect on the life and contribution and the legacy of Simiso Nkwanyana. We are here today to register our presence and to pledge our support to a leader that came before us, one who paved a way for us to be called Student Representative Council. While we reflect on the theme of the day, it is essential to acknowledge the legacy of Simiso Nkwanyana, a student leader whose unwavering commitment to reform and social equity, a student representation who continues to inspire the future generations. We are here because he came before us and he paved the way for us to be able to stand in this platform. Organizers were very much grateful for this event, but next time we must start by build-ups, where we have student engagement first before the event, where young people are able to express their ideas and share their knowledge before the main event. But we are starting now, we're going in a certain direction. While we reflect, his contribution in building a strong voice at Unisa reminds us that leadership is about service, sacrifice, creating opportunities to the future generation. The progress we see at Unisa today demonstrates the effort and the sacrifice of leaders like Simiso Nkwanyana were not in vain. So this is what we see, the progress that we are seeing in the university, the rankings we are seeing, is because of the people who fought for those rights and where we are today. So we are very much grateful for that. The Unisa SRC would like to acknowledge and commend the progress made by Unisa, especially under the leadership of Professor Linkampula, the Principal and the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. Her appointment as the first woman and the first black woman to lead Unisa is a clear sign of the university's commitment to transformation and inclusive leadership. This is the kind of meaningful transformation that Simiso Nkwanyana believed in the higher education. We also appreciate the Unisa's commitment on an open distance learning institution, which gives thousands of Unisa students access to a university education. While we celebrate this progress and achievement of Unisa, there are still challenges that requires our attention. As the Unisa SRC, our responsibility is not only to raise concerns, but also to contribute to solutions. We remain committed to work with the university leadership and all relevant stakeholders to strengthen student success and building more responsible and student-centered institutions. We honor the legacy of Simiso Nkwanyana. We recommit ourselves to the values that guided his leadership: transformation, justice, accountability, service delivery. On behalf of the Unisa SRC Student Representative Council, we congratulate the university leadership, the staff, the academic, and students for this progress made. We reaffirm our commitment to working towards a more inclusive, accessible, and excellent University of South Africa. And that I thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
concern with leadership. And ladies and gentlemen, I think it's also important to mention that Mr. Nkwanyana is still fresh in the seat. We can feel the fire, and I hope that fire is not gonna die. Thank you for challenging us, and I hope that particularly the challenge that they should also ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much, Program Director, Prof. I just want to start by appreciating and thanking very much the Speaker for accepting this invitation. Knowing how busy she is, but she saw it fit when the invitation was sent that she's definitely going to come today and be part of this fourth Simiso Nkwanyana Memorial Lecture. We want to thank you very much, sincerely, Speaker. But also I want to thank the VC today, Prof. Lengapula, for just coming. Thank you very much. We know in the last 3 lectures, we got the message and there were representatives that were representing you, senior leadership of the University of the Land. So consistently, the support has been felt, but we appreciate a lot that today you manage successfully to be part of us. We appreciate it as a family, but also even as the Simiso Nkwanyana Institute. The team is there at the back. We want to appreciate that. Thirdly, we want to thank very much everyone who is here today, and most of you, the faces have been consistent in the last 3 years, and even today you are present, which demonstrates the commitment to this project, actually as led by Unisa. I said, VC, last year when I was making my remarks, that we appreciate that this lecture, when it was started, the first speaker was the Minister of Higher Education and Training then, Dr. Blade Zimande. The following year it was the current Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo. Last year we had Ambassador Sbundebele, who's a former Premier of the province. And this year we are having the Speaker of our National Parliament. So the message that we were saying is about the maturing level each year that this lecture is gaining. And it's something that we want to appreciate as a family. That Unisa is not only saying that it recognizes former leaders who made an impact, but there's a demonstrable commitment that we can see, especially with regard to Simiso Nkwanyana, precisely because he contributed so much quite earlier. I think he did his first year here, it must have been 1990 or 1991, and immediately he started to organize. Osteb at the back there, they will testify how he was mobilizing all of them at that time against what was the institutional culture that was exclusionary by nature to people like me and you at that time. Even study manuals, Afrikaans and everything. I remember at one point, I think on 3 occasions, he got arrested because he was just leading these actions here, but also even in Pretoria. He created that network across Unisa. On one day, I think it must have been 1992, when the news in SAPC broke that he was arrested, I think my mother nearly collapsed at that time. But that's when she realized that he was involved in politics, because he kept on hiding that particular part. But because it was a big story and all of that, that's when she realized that she's in politics, and the ANC had to intervene to release him at that time. So it became clear that he was deeply involved at that time. So cumulatively, that resulted into qualitative change. As a result, they began the first SRC that they led quite earlier, just after 1994. Consistently, that's the legacy that he left at that time. So we want to appreciate as a family the institution that shaped him in the similar way as he shaped it in terms of the qualitative change at that time. So you could see that those who did political science, dialectically, he changed it as much as he was changed by it to be what he became at that time. So it became a natural progression for him to be scouted by the SACP at that time, young as he was, to lead the SACP in the province. Omkachwa, ukhona namhlanje as a testimony, Comrade James. He has been a chairperson of the province. He was part of that generation of leaders together with Comrade Smith at that time. So we wanted to make that appreciation, but also to say that we think that today we're going to have a good discussions that are going to emerge out of this lecture. I get excited, Mamutidiza, when we deal with issues of land, because I've also worked in the Department of Agriculture, both in the province and national. You know, when we were coming in 2019, I was exiting with the former minister, so I get excited quite a lot. I think that the audience is going to be empowered quite immensely, because the issues of land are tied up with the issues of economy, issues of rural development. Sometimes when we deal with issues of rural development, we think about just projects, we think about only land transfer, but we don't talk about a consistent, sustainable economic ecosystem in rural areas, so that they themselves emerges into above the parapet in a similar way as urban areas. So it's an important discussion for all of us, so that we get out of the matrix of being stuck in the urban area to say, how do we go back and build that economy from where we come from? And I think that's what Simiso also wanted or entered politics to achieve at that time. So in those few words, on behalf of the family, we want to thank everyone who's here, and we are saying we're extending our appreciation, but also to the panel that is going to ascend to the stage after the main address. Prof. Modi, we are one of the agronomists in the country. I think this is a relevant discussion to you. Nangu baba ngale ukukuletu is already is involved in many rural projects in the country. Advocate Matul, I was listening to you in the morning in SAFM. You were talking about this lecture. It was quite exciting. Thank you very much. But I want to thank everybody, the leadership of Unisa, all the professors, the academics who are here. I want to thank the student leadership. I must make a disclaimer that when I saw in the program, the new president of the SRC, so that we are not calling to Madlanga, I did not lobby for him to emerge as a president. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Babu Nkwanyana, for those remarks. One does not have to look for it. We can feel and sense the passion, particularly for the topic for tonight. One can see that it lives in your heart. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I welcome Professor Oupa Mashile, who is the Acting Deputy Registrar, Student Administration and System Integration here at Unisa, to assist me in introducing our keynote speaker for tonight. Please, let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Thank you, Madam Program Director. Madam VC, I'm to introduce Madam Speaker. Honorable Togo Didiza is the elected Speaker of the National Assembly in the 7th Parliament of South Africa. She was the youngest member of the first executive government appointed as the Deputy Minister of Agriculture by President Nelson Mandela from 1994 to 1999. Soon after, she rose to ministerial positions, starting as the Minister of Agriculture and Local Affairs between 1999 and 2006. Then to Minister of Public Works from 2006 to 2008. In 2008, she took leave from the executive and ventured into the farming and food business. Between 2011 and 2014, she was the project manager at the University of South Africa, responsible for the establishment of the Achima Feje Research Institute on Applied Social Policy. She returned to Parliament in 2014 to 2019 to become the House Chairperson of the National Assembly, responsible for international arrangements. Between 2019 and 2024, she was the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development. Before becoming a member of Parliament, Honorable Didiza worked in several companies. First as a legal secretary and program officer, She also held numerous leadership positions such as the Youth Coordinator of the South African Council of Young Women Christian Association and Secretary General of the Women's National Coalition that produced the Women's Charter for Effective Equality that was then tabled in the first Parliament of South Africa. Honorable Didiza entered politics through anti-apartheid activism, initially in Christian organizations and women's groups. She was the inaugural Secretary General of the Women's National Coalition in 1992. Mrs. Didiza is a dedicated, results-oriented politician and professional with a proven record of accomplishment in creating and implementing development and growth-stimulating policies and negotiating win-win solutions for the citizen. Honorable Didiza possesses a broad knowledge of South Africa and Africa's economic, social, and political understanding, with extensive first-hand experience in agriculture, land affairs, infrastructure development, and rural economic sectors. Mrs. Didiza holds a master's degree in tertiary education management, an honors in politics, and a Bachelor of Arts degree majoring in sociology and politics. She has several diplomas in journalism, business and financial management, public relations, and personnel and training practice. She was nominated as one of the young global leaders by the Klaus Schwab Foundation in 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, Speaker of the National Assembly, Parliament of South Africa.
Ngibonge kakhulu kumphathisihlalo walomcimbi wanamhlanje. Ngibingelele umama uNkwanyana nomndeni wonke wakaNkwanyana. Ngibingelele okungiyena mphathisikole senyuvesi yaseNingizimu Afrika udadewethu uNjingalwazi Puleng Lingapona. Ngibingelele nabo bonke onjingalwazi nodokotela kanye nalabo abaphethe iminyango ngokuhlukana kwayo yenyuvesi yaseNingizimu Afrika khona la kwelengabade kwelikamthani yesikulo KwaZulu-Natal kuzo zonke inhlaka la kukhona le nyuvesi ngisho nasezweni laseTopia imbala. Ngiphinde ngibingelele umntakazwide okhona phakathi kwethu. Angilazi kahle ke lezulu igama kodwa ngizothi phecelezi kwelondlebe sikhanyilanga uJames abamaziyo. Ngiphinde ngibingelele uma ngabe sefikile usihlalo we-institute ebizwa ngosingaye uSimiso Nkwanyana uqabane uZ Luzipo. Ngibingelele amaqabane akhona la ahambisana naye kanye namaqabane amadlela ndawonye ayingxenye yawo uSimiso Nkwanyana. Ngibingelele ke Osgode umholi wabafundi othe ukuthi nje shwankathi singamazwi amafushane kodwa nomyalezo oqosheme ukuthi kumele senzeni siyinyuvesi ekulungiseleni usuku olufana naloku. Siyabonga mfundi, sizazi ke inkokheli zabafundi zinjalo ekutheni aziliyeki ithuba uma zilinikiwe. Ngibingelele ke nabaholi babafundi abakhona bakulesigungu esisha esikhethiwe abakhona la kanye nalabo ababengabaholi babafundi ngaphambilini kuze kuyofika kuleyo eyayikade iholwa nguNkwanyana. Ngibingelele ke kithina sonke ngobukhona bethu esikhona la kulomcimbi. Ngingelibaleke abantu basemlomo phecelezi ngolika George kuthiwa isemelmoth nabo abazile ukuzoxhasa lolusuku lwanamhlanje. Ngingasho ukuthi kuyintokozo enkulu ukuthi namhlanje sihlangene sonke la ukuzokhumbula iqhawe elazibonakalisa liselincane ukuthi ubuholi buyini ngokuthi akwazi ukuhlanganisa imfundo kanye nomzabalazo wabahlali. Namhlanje senza into enkulu sile nyuvesi ngokuthi sihlale sibe nesikhumbuzo ekubhekeni amaqhawe ahamba ngaphambili. Sibalekile isikhumbuzo ngoba senza ukuthi umlando singawukhohlwa. Ngoba abanye baye bathi kusizani ngoba sezadlula lapho. Kodwa uma ubheka kwezinye inhlaka silokhu siyokhumbuzwa ukuthi amaJuda abulawa ngamaJalimane ngezikhathi esithize. Kwesinye isikhathi uma uthi uyabheka okwenzekayo umuthi uba usho okungahambisani bese kuthiwa abawafuni abesizwe esithize. Isikhumbuzo siyinto esibalekile ngoba esikhumbuzweni sifunda umlando. Esikhumbuzweni siyesibheka ukuthi ngabe lokho ababekumele ngaphambili kuseyiko namhlanje. Program Director, permit me to express my deepest appreciation to the Nkwanyana family for their generosity in continuing to celebrate and share Simiso's legacy with South Africa. It is also the greatest gratitude to the University of South Africa for ensuring that the leadership values and political convictions that he embraced and stood for are kept alive. I'm particularly honored to have been bestowed with an opportunity to deliver the fourth lecture commemorating the life and legacy of Comrade Simiso Nkwanyana, a visionary leader born in the rural town of Melmoth, who rose to the leadership of his organization, but also to the alliance, having sharpened his politics and charismatic skills during his student days at the University of South Africa in the 1990s. At the time of his death, he was serving as the SACP Provincial Secretary and concurrently as the ANC Provincial Coordinator for the 2004 elections. He was amongst the youngest leaders in the alliance. Although he never lived to see those elections, they were iconic in this province because they were the ones in which the ANC took control and secured its rightful place as the leader of society and government in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. That was the strength of the alliance, a moment of greatness achieved through hard work, collective, ethical and decisive leadership, and selfless commitment to serving our people. Comrades and compatriots, many of you will recall that on the eve of his untimely death, he was coming from a night-long meeting preparing for the Provincial Congress of the South African Municipal Workers' Union, the golden days that liberated people from political violence, the workers from capitalist exploitation, students to access affordable and free education, and the women, youth, and rural communities from poverty. In his work within the alliance, Comrade Simiso understood the significance of a unified voice in representing the poor, rural, and working class against the giant head of capitalism. He understood the value of unity in diversity as a fundamental pillar in building a better South Africa that is prosperous, non-sexist, and non-racial. He appreciated that only a united alliance can meaningfully pursue land restorative justice and social cohesion agenda. I think it's the challenge for those who live today. How do we go back on those beliefs of Comrade Simiso Nkwanyana to continue to reflect in that unity of our movement. The comrades I'm talking about was not just a source of wise counsel within the alliance structures, but also a fountain of hope and inspiration for students and young people in our country. Those who knew and served with Nkwanyana will affectionately recall him as a fearless leader, a rising peacemaker, a strategist of note, an excellent theorist and religious Marxist, who was part of Unisa's first Student Representative Council, as we have heard from his brother, but also from the VC. During their reign as student leaders, Nkwanyana and his comrades influenced the Tertiary Education Student Fund of South Africa, the predecessor of NSFAS. It was during his leadership that the working class at Unisa were actually acknowledged, but also the role of students in shaping policy of the university was understood. And I must say, VC, that one of the things that sometimes as South Africans we forget is the role that the University of South Africa has played in expanding access to education for many. Many students today who are leaders in various spheres of our society would not have been able to do so without the University of South Africa. Many of the students who were detained and jailed would not have had an opportunity to expand their education had it not be for Unisa. And I think it is important for us, as we see Unisa evolving, we should not forget that past. But also the innovation that has been brought by Unisa in ensuring that the distance learning university has been able to creatively come up with offerings that are able to actually sharpen our society's research capability and also inform the changes that are so required by our country. We heard of aeronautics and aviation education, but maybe somebody who worked in the agricultural sector, I know the role of the university, like the University of South Africa, starting programs on agriculture and rural development. And I'm sure a number of people might have said, how will Unisa do this when it's not a university with resident, programs all the time? But that innovation has enabled Unisa to be able to get facilities that will make agricultural education a reality. And I do hope that one of the offerings that Unisa will have is to strengthen rural development access, which is so needed in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, as an astute Marxist, Comrade Simiso understood that the universities are not just places where young people go to learn and acquire qualifications. However, the institutions of higher learning are sites of struggle themselves. And it is at these sites where future leaders are born and shaped for the benefit of society. It is on these sites where mechanisms to develop rural areas and preserve the value of land are generated. Nkwanyana understood that higher learning institutions can assist in producing leaders who can solve the land and agrarian question in South Africa. Leaders who can handle the migration issues with the care and clarity it deserves. Leaders who are capable of restoring people's trust and hope in the functionality of our municipalities. But leaders who will also appreciate the importance of sharing knowledge across other higher education institutes, as we have heard today that we have got professors also who come from the University of Walter Sisulu, because knowledge will actually thrive if we are able to continuously engage and also deal with discourses that are affecting our society wherever they are. These values and principles are what Comrade Simiso wanted us to remember him for. Hence, his name will forever shine bright and remain visibly written in the epitaph of history of our country and this university in particular. Tonight, as we honor Comrade Simiso's memory, we engage a theme that he would have appreciated. Land as a catalyst and rural economic development. I'm not sure whether the South African Communist Party still have that campaign on Red October that focused on the land question. If it doesn't, maybe we need to remind them for the sake of Comrade Simiso. I'm intrigued by the theme of his proximity to my heart, having spent events which were carried to the Congress of the People in Kliptown in 1955, where the Freedom Charter was adopted. It declared that the land shall be shared among those who work it, demanding the end of racial land restriction and the need for redistribution of land to banish famine and land hunger amongst black people, Africans in particular. Probably one of the challenges that this clause of the Freedom Charter, and I'm sure as scholars and when we engage in these discourses, the question we ask ourselves, why was that not pronounced in the negotiation process on land reform in particular in 1994? I don't know, but I would posit to think that while it was necessary to look at those who worked it, but the others had no means because they were removed. We all know that while there might have been forced removals, some of the people were actually retained not because of their will to actually become labor tenants and pay by working in the land in order to survive and subsist and stay in those lands that are called home, which is part of the contradiction when we look at our restitution programs and land reform in general, without understanding the various layers of that disposition and the responses amongst our people. I'm not the one who's supposed to dissect the topic. There are scholars who are supposed to do that today. But I'm just saying that in this discourse, these are some of the issues we need to reflect on and say, was it the better option or not? But also, in the land discourse in South Africa, one of the things we might not have spoken about is the class dimension in the land question in South Africa. That's gonna peli itup. You know, a landlord among us. My great-grandfather, who actually owned land at Tolini. You also have many others in our country who bought land endaweni zase eGroundville, also endaweni zase Edenvale, ko Shalastone. Yabona lokho kuthiwa they are exempted even though they are oppressed. That shows the dimensions of the land discourse in South Africa, which I think in dealing with the post-1994 land question might not have been dissected enough on how we must deal with those issues. That's why when you look at the land restitution cases, some of those cases, when they were about to be resolved, that issue emerged, like the Makotopong case in Limpopo, where the 7 families, among them the Sonos, Abazalana, no Professor Shisan, they said, actually, this land was owned by 7 families. Msanugu slanganisa nama lodgers. Okanye singathi iqashi. And I think at that time we started to say, but how does this happen? Because all of you niyafana. But you are the same, but the level of ownership had a difference here. Some of us paid on this land. So when you're dealing with this issue, you can't equate the restitution. is the same in Driefontein, Babu Solim Kiz, where a majority of those communities fought and bought the land back, but because they were generous, when some people were moved out of their land, they accepted them as lodgers. And they were saying, when you dealt with the land reform question as this new government, you actually did not understand these layers. And when you deal with issues of social justice, you are actually disadvantaging us for the second time. You now affirm a lodger in my land, and you don't compensate me because you want me to understand. Those are the discourses that I don't think we have unpacked enough when we look at the land question in South Africa. Again, in rural communities, the dilemma, particularly ey'ndaweni zasemakhaya, that we find ourselves in when it comes to the land question, is the issue of characterizing ownership. Are we understanding ownership from your Eurocentric individual, me, an owner, or in the African context, which deals with us as custodians of this land for the ones that are living today and those who will come after? Because ngesintu, ekhaya will always be ekhaya. It doesn't matter whether our parents have died. It doesn't matter whether I live Kwamsane. Some of you had forgotten whether when I left Kwamsane, I go and marry the Titiza. I've not lost my heritage of being umntana wakavusumuzi Msane nolamotha. When I say nyekhaya, that's still my portion. If uTitiza tomorrow wakes up and say akasangifuni, likhona ikhaya lapha, my brother uMbongeni must make space for me because that's my heritage. So that's part of the discourses when we look at the land question in South Africa. In my view, we've tinkered, we've not yet dealt with it. So that is why today you also have a misnomer of traditional leaders in our country who now assume that they are the owners of that land, not custodians. Because amakhosi in our context were actually the guardians of the land of its people, not owners. You see those dynamics when it comes to the restitution cases where some of the traditional leaders are part of the community whose land have been restituted back, and then besebeti aswafuna ma CPA. It's not about CPA or community property association as structures. It's because of this dilemma that now this land that has been brought back, it's now tenured in terms of the Eurocentric understanding of ownership as opposed to the collective ancestral understanding of land. Africa, dynamics. I'm leaving it for Onjigalwazi to dissect very further. But I just want to say, progress has been visible. I wouldn't like to bore you with the numbers, but I think what has been important is that as we evolve on dealing with the land question in South Africa, one of the important pillars that had to be brought in the discourse was the element of gender parity. Recognizing that women's access to land is equally important than everyone else. And that youth access to land and people with disability must be part of the markers as we deal with this land question in our country. Coming back to the question of inclusion for women and black farmers in commercial agriculture, one of the strides that our government has made is to ensure that it is not just about the ownership and having the access, but it's also about seeing land as an economic asset so that those who were the owners of the land and participating in the agrarian economy can also reflect the South Africa's reality of post-1994. We may not be where we want to be, but I think these are some strides that we continue to make. So when we remember Simiso Nkwanyana, we need to continue these discourses and dialogue about what the land question and agrarian question in the context of rural development mean for South Africa of today and South Africa of the future. Because my child and their children, their understanding of the land question and its role in the social and economic development of our country is different than what some of us and those we come after might have understood. I'd like, therefore, to say, as Abonjingalwazi come to engage with us on this important question, we must remember the words of our president of the student leaders, Nkwanyana himself, Uzigode, ukuthi as we deliberate on this question in the context of the 30 years of our constitution, it mustn't end today because we're here to have a lecture, but this discourse must continue as we lead to actually say, what does this mean for South Africa of today? If Simiso Nkwanyana was still alive, what would he have done in ensuring that land plays an important role in transforming the rural sector of our country? I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, another round of applause. I don't know about all of you, but boy, am I glad that I chose to be here tonight. That was a brilliant, brilliant lecture. Thank you so much, Metoko Didiza, for taking us on that very important journey, for reminding us of the importance of history, first and foremost, and connecting that to where we are today, that even as we grapple with the issue of land today, that we should understand the multi-dimensions and the layers and layers of what it means for us to engage and think about land reform. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pause here as we're going to unpack that lecture even more. And to assist us to do that, I'm going to invite my colleague and sister, Ms. Liana Grissel-Hubert, who is our acting Chief Financial Officer at Unisa, to come and moderate the discussion with the panelists. Please, let's give her a round of applause.
To beautiful Prof. Puleng, and also to the beautiful other Puleng, Prof. Puleng. So I'm just here. I was wondering why they choose a chief financial officer to do this panel discussion. Is there something that I need to pull out the pocket, Prof. Puleng? I'm not so sure about that. Program Director, our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, Honorable Speaker, Madam Toku Tedisa, I'm totally inspired. You know, some of us standing in front here tonight doesn't even know half of the struggles of our country. And that is why we so appreciate these lecturers, because it brings people from across our country together. And it's time that we learn from these struggles. And I hope that this panel discussion will even further the social upliftment, social development, social cohesion of how land reform development can take this country to a next level. And it's quite interesting that we talk about the University of the Land. It's quite interesting there, University of the Land, land reform. So, tongue in the cheek there. So, needless to say, I don't want to take time. I want to invite our esteemed panelists, and I was wondering if we could help to have a seating arrangement, and I want to move from formality to far more engagement. I really want to call upon our esteemed panelists, Professor Albert Moody, Advocate Sipho Mantula, Shaulele Zupiso, and Guguletu Traba. And I'm not so sure, but he said he's not part of the panel, but I wonder, Prof. Senokwane, are you still part of our panel? I saw him on the flight, so I know he's here. We almost missed it, and I think he should be joining me. You know, last year I said at this session, Professor Senokwane and I joined many legacies. Okay, I think we need to grab seats. Yes, no, not behind me. That's not land reform. We need to go. There we are. Is he joining us? No. No, okay. Shall I grab this mic? Shall I sit there and then... I feel like pulling now. I'm going to do that sitting. Is he not part? Okay. All right. So, colleagues, as I've indicated, I'm not going to even... I prepared all of these papers, Honourable Speaker, and then I decided I'm not going to use any of this. Maybe here or there I'll cheat and have a look at the papers, but I really want us to start immediately to focus on post-1994. I think that's the burning question, won't you agree? Post-1994 policy reform. And I would like our panel to give that position post-1994 around inclusivity of the policy, what is excluded, and then how do we take that forward, and how could the University of South Africa assist, and especially take what is excluded and make it inclusive. Any of the panel members can start, because I think that's the burning question. Post-1994, let's not talk shop. Let's go to the point and talk to that. Anyone can go first, and let's engage. It's just, we all have, do you have a mic? If no one starts, I'm going to say, okay. Thanks.
Good evening, Minister and VC. I'm going to just mention you. Where I come from, Amapondo say, Inganga Nensi Bazali. Post-1994 inclusivity, University of the Land. I see that as a question.
Absolutely. I truly love the first two speakers. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you so much, Rihanna. Sanbonan. Angiqala ngixolise ngokamajoga uye wathi leli gama lithi guguletha ngilishintshe becabanga ukuthi ngowesifazane. nami ngiyamangala Madam Speaker ukuthi kuhle amadododo la phambili. Mhlawumbe igama lami leli liyelenza ukuthi kwaba cabanga ukuthi uzobe khona nomela abesifazane. Ngiyacabanga next time if I see nibhekisise kuba aba-arrangeayo. Ukugulethu kunjalo. Ngibizwe ngoMiss no Sam uthe mangi-address ukuthi Miss Gugulethu. Angithi mhlawumbe for me, I come from the practical economy side. When it comes to this, it's a very interesting and very close to my heart topic. Ukuthi land as a catalyst for rural economic development. First of all, mukhuluma nge-catalyst, what is it? For those who have studied science and chemistry, you'd remember when we used to do experiments. We used to say catalyst is a chemical substance that speeds up what? A reaction. Right? I think from just that explanation and definition of what a catalyst is, we need to start there. I know Madam Speaker has given us a very beautiful, clear, a speech around this topic that we're dealing with tonight, especially from her coming from the vantaged position of having been part of government and been part of different departments and many positions looking at the overall picture of the agriculture in South Africa. And when it comes to this particular topic, a catalyst for rural economic development and to assist people from rural areas like myself and many others, how do we rise from this level where we are at right now? Because it seems to be a problem. Yesterday, we ran what we call Ruranomics last 2 weeks here at the ICC, which is a program focusing now on driving rural economic development in South Africa. Intentionally so, driven again by people who come from rural areas like me from Wanongoma. To say we understand rural areas because we've got tacit knowledge and lived experiences of rurality, and therefore would like to become catalysts, first and foremost ourselves, to bring about the change that needs to be seen in our rural areas. I think what, again, for me is very important, just to bring this thing from 100 foot to 10 foot, we need to understand that, I think, as Madam Speaker has mentioned, a lot has been done. Sawudinga umhlaba, mningi ongakabuyi ezandleni zethu. But lo osezandleni zethu senzani ngawo? It's a big, fat question. Umhlaba osezandleni zethu, what it needs is an ecosystem of rural development that will really address what Simiso stood for, and many of our heroes and heroines stood for, to say, let us get wealth into our hands, especially as black, specifically African people. Yinto edingalayo kule ecosystem. Ngizowenza example nje, and then as I pass the mic. Njengamanje sikhuluma nge-farming, kunama-CPAs, Honorable Speaker, maningi. Nomhlaba mningi ulele, akwenzeki lutho. We have got 100 farmers who are majority white, specifically African white farmers, who are driving 90% of the food production, and 10% is driven by about 50%. That's very skewed. And we need to change that. Because if food security says, let's get that equation leveled out, but so njani? No mechanization, khona ugandaganda owodwa la ishowe orana to 20 black farmers. I'm a farmer myself. Awufiki kimi ngesikhathi. And baningi abanye ogandaganda, they are just lying there, mhlamba bathe ngohulumeni. But in the 65%, potential that we have in the whole of Africa, globally, for arable land. Is there any tractor manufacturing facility in Africa? What about in South Africa? Ngikhuluma nge-assemble plant. Now, agriculture is a time-sensitive industry. You miss it by 1 week, you've missed it. So where are the tractors? That's where I would add and say, when it comes to the development of the ecosystem we're talking about, that's one key factor. Tractors, implements, as Prof. Modi was talking about, part of it which is seeds. And that is very crucial for us to have within the ecosystem a structured way of truly developing rural areas and making sure we have got, again, there's risk capital that we need. But importantly, let's talk about tractors, all the necessary implements. And how do universities like Unisa works in the entire ecosystem of educational institutions, together with 51 TVET colleges. We're talking about unemployment that is so much prevalent. The question is, fine, Unisa is going to come with this knowledge-based and drive and all sorts of things, but that's where then you can start co-joining all of these other institutions in terms of the TVET colleges to maintain those tractors. And if we can just try and solve that particular issue, would really see a real dramatic and seismic difference in bringing the catalyst for rural development.
Beautiful, beautiful.
No, thank you. It's nice to be the last one. At least you have listened to everyone. And you can change your script if you like.
Yeah.
But let me greet the Honorable Speaker, the Prof. If I had time, Prof, Jengo VC, I would have said something about Simiso and yourself that was common. Yeah. I know. But one day we will share it. But first, let me make this confession that I was the last person to see Simiso Nkwanyana. And since then, I've never spoken on any platform. And it's not easy. Even today, I always say, even if you take me to the Madlanga Commission, I'll never say I forgot what happened that day. Because it always reflects on the mind. When somebody says, I want to see you, when you arrive on the room, please open the window. I want to see you, you are safe. And that wave, that will be the last one that you will share with the person. So to me, it's still like yesterday, it will never go. But I take comfort on the fact that in that short space of time, Comrade Simiso had made a lot for the years that he was. One fact people may not like, which is that Simiso was a very staunch, I always call it, was a very staunch, these days we call them national. He was a member of the ANC Youth League. And he was also a leader of SASCO. For me, the first time we met, it was a very big fight in the meeting. But for those characters, I learned that after the meeting was the first one to come to me and introduced himself, although others who were in the meeting were not happy. So I'm starting with this thing so that, because the most dangerous thing in history is when things are done to tone down the character of the individual. I can tell you, if Simiso was in the house, the laugh that you would have heard, that you can't miss it, you can't hide it by me. But it was not just a laugh. The level of intellectualism in him was beyond his age. And I want us to start from that point to say, correct Mamo Speaker, to say I'm a communist. But the truth is, Simiso was a communist. Yeah. That should not be diluted. And he was not just a communist, he was a Marxist-Leninist. Not every communist is a Marxist-Leninist. Probably not every Marxist is a Leninist. But also it's possible that you can have a Marxist-Leninist who is a Stalinist. Somebody who has got paranoia with different ideas to an extent that it becomes a danger to the same class that you seek to liberate. So when we talk about the transformation of land, for me, I know that Nkwanyana's first question would have been transforming the land in whose class interest. Because in South Africa, if we are going to transform land and leave the class element, because we have always argued that ours is a struggle for national liberation, but for others is the struggle for socialism through the national liberation. And therefore, these are momentary gains. They are not the ultimate gains. And I think for me, that is the element at times that is lacking. When we talk about land, what is land first? That should be the question. What is land? The problem is that in South Africa these days we said South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Little did we know. Now today I'm worried that you get even some of us, communists, that says in South Africa must be borderless. There is no nation state, even a classless society, that does not have borders. So legality and sovereignty cannot be separated. And it cannot be seen as if it is not the same as humanity. Every nation state, even those who have experienced socialism, even in the Soviet Union, they would know you become a nation state, you create a classless society, and then you build the momentum of that classless society to the next borders. So that is, I think for me, this is a very critical, the problem is that we should not run away from that reality. In South Africa, we should, whilst we are building working class hegemony and working class power, it should not mean that that working class can only exist in South Africa. It must also exist to others. And you can only do so not by opening up your borders, that they should not have limited and defined roles. So I thought sometimes when you say khuluma ngomhlaba, ingathi everyone nje uvulela nje kudedeleka. The first problem in South Africa we must address is that to what extent do we address the question of land in South Africa, but also the question of despotism of leadership in the African continent. Because even if you address, once you address the question of land, you address the question of unemployment, South Africa because they are attracted in South Africa and allow others to continue the way they do in their own countries. There should be no comfort for our own African leaders who are failing to make the freedom of their own people to have a meaningful impact to an extent that they can feel that it must be attained next door. So I'm not raising this thing. There's nothing that is a character. If you are Cuban, you are Cuban. Sure. But you can't just walk into Cuba and say, no, this is a socialism. You will have to obey, you will find the rules and laws in Cuba that will make you, including how you behave, by the way. Even if you must be a socialist when you figure out. So I thought for me, if we are going to address this question of land, we must deal with that thing. At least we have made, let me remind you again, Parliament in our own Kuba, they opened up every opening of a term of Parliament. They have got something called, they call it Constitutional Review Committee. As a submitted as this Simiso Nkwanyana Center for Alternative Ideas, we got acknowledgement, but we have never got an invitation to say bring your submissions. We must get it so that first we must fix our constitution, because the constitution was done in goodwill. There are unintended consequences that we are reaping in that constitution, not because we wanted to, but so we have to address that. The last two things I want to address very quickly. The second thing is that if you are talking about catalysts for rural development, we must change our pattern of revenue distribution. You know, I'm listening even here when we talk about agriculture and everything. I can tell you now, there's nothing wrong with rural development as long as it's like gender for me. It cannot be allocated to a specific department. It must cut across. The problem with rural development, it is only allocated a department. It's not a responsibility that is being monitored across everyone, whether it's their investment that is being done. And now, when you talk about rural areas, you can only think about agriculture, as if nothing else can happen in activating activities in the rural areas. Basic things I was telling people, when people talk about water and sanitation, they will tell you about the reality is that a person in the rural areas, the first thing we are they must have dams where they can be able. Is it provided for? I can say it's very little. When we talk about the development, transport today, there is no allocated budget for rural roads, to develop rural roads. In budget where it will go most, it is where you are required to have a third road. Absolutely. So if we are going to do, we need a comprehensive strategy that is going to respond on every facet and aspect of the rural development, including the kind of education and the conditions under which these learners go and study. I system system instead of responding to why these kids are not there, they will not be there because the majority is migrating to towns. So for me, the centrality of the class question as the next step is very critical. And that's why I'm saying, if we are speaking about Simiso, he transformed from a nationalist into a person today who championed, by the way, the Communist Party here in KZN was the biggest. And when Oma Officer was here with Congress in 1998, it was through Simiso Nkwanyana that by the time we went to that Congress, we were the second biggest province, when we built the province from one branch. So we must talk about an individual who understood what needs to be done. But lastly, it was at the time of his passing away, those who may not understand today, I'm not saying anything, by the way, but Simiso died when he was the Deputy Elections Coordinator of the African National Congress in KwaZulu-Natal. In fact, the ANC wanted to take him and we refused. We said, it's enough to be the Uba Alana, there is no way you will be full-time. But all what I'm saying is that part of the legacy of Simiso is that we must make sure that it is not a common sense attitude towards rural development. We should not lead rural development out of gut feelings and sympathy for the rural people. I still believe there is a lot of capacity, potential. It is how much work are we doing to make those people not to just get farms and not know what to do with the farm. It's not their fault they don't know what is wrong with the farms. It is us who are failing to give them the required capacity building so that they can run those farms. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. So, colleagues, I'm trying to put together the central principles of land. So it must be connected with people, finance, skills, infrastructure, technology, and markets. And if we bring that in an inclusive manner, but VC, what I'm learning through our discussions this evening is there's a huge opportunity for Unisa, and I'm looking at our esteemed executive deans and asking myself, what I've learned here, just from a financial side of point of view, the multidisciplinarity that I've learned here, And one of the principles that I've picked up from the latest research on rural development, the issue around the graves, the issue around dignity. How far are we in investigating and researching that inclusivity and the understanding of social inclusion? And those I'm putting forward to our executive deans. And we've learned that we don't need qualifications per se. What about our lifelong learning opportunities? We are the University of the land. We're not Makuneer. We're KZN. We're the Northern Cape. We are everywhere in this country. How can we build on the infrastructure that is bestowed to the University of South Africa, the University of the land, and broaden the discourse of rural development? I'm not done yet, because I'm enjoying myself thoroughly here by listening to you. And the one thing, and then I'm going to conclude and then we're going to have dinner, is what I'm learning, and sometimes it can be a political question, but we're here for the legacy of Simiso. So, and I've just learned now, you can hear the passion, isn't it? We can hear the passion of his legacy coming through even tonight. And I'm going to ask the question, land ownership does not automatically lead to economic development. Doesn't automatically lead. Because we've learned about the policy gaps, or even not even policy. We've learned about the siloed mentality. So my last question, and I'm just going to ask that we just reflect quickly, and then when you end your response, because we're starting with Women's Month next, the question is, how do we ensure that women, young people, and the Honourable Speaker also mentioned persons with disabilities, are not merely beneficiaries of rural development programs, but they become landowners, entrepreneurs, decision makers, and leaders within the rural economy. So, first and foremost, land ownership does not automatically lead to economic development. What is the issues? And then end up with a short summary on, I want to hear your voices around women.
Okay, let me start again. Very briefly, as you said, of course, land ownership doesn't lead necessarily to rural economic development. But again, if you link it to the role of a woman, and I'm going to stick to this point, the role of a woman, the success of any family is the ability of a woman to make that family succeed. So if you take women in the rural areas and the culture of Africa, these people used to share knowledge and work together to build a family, a community, and influence the success of a community. So if we can challenge universities and ask them the question, are you perpetuating colonialism, or are you fundamentally transforming Africa through your curriculum? A curriculum that allows a professor that is A-rated to recognize a woman who cannot use AI. And you come back after talking to that woman and accelerate the indigenous knowledge system and integrate it into something that combines science, engineering, technology, mathematics, philosophy, psychology, all of them together. And then you say, innovation is what is required in order for land to lead to rural economic development.
Thank you.
Prof, for me, if we use the land to the benefit of our own communities. The ownership, it is very key. That issue that came in terms of title deeds, in terms of lease, I think the issue of rural development is when communities are able to utilize that land and we don't have barren land. Some of the land was sold to the state, which there was no water, there was nothing. How do we correct that? And I think that's where it goes to the question of local economic development. What then is the role of municipality in rural development? As it was said earlier, how do we mainstream this concept of rural development? And why is it placed only on land, but not on economy? It's not placed on arts and culture, on higher education. And I think that's where, as Unisa, we have bought farms, I think so, Prof. Linkabula, 10 hectares, or is how many farms?
670 hectares.
Wow, 670 hectares, you see? And the rural economy moves to green economy now, Professor. We're in green now, moving to the green economy now, which I think we are not even utilizing. The green economy that was raised earlier on climate change is, are we even planting indigenous trees to conserve nature? Are we going on a green economy of cannabis? Is it only other universities? When we know that KwaZulu-Natal also on the cannabis industry can go further. And that's what we call socialism in practice now, where we are able to share. So for me, ownership must not be skewed, must also benefit the youth, must benefit women, it must also benefit the workers, those who are working in the farms. How do farm workers become the shareholders in the farm? Let's go to co-ownership. But we have not reached that stage. Absolutely. And I think that's where we have those serious challenges.
Thank you very much.
Land ownership does not necessarily automatically lead to economic development. Can I just make this practical? I think my colleague here mentioned that we're not just talking about land in terms of farming, but land in rural areas must be fully integrated, looked into. Ngizalo district ekuthiwa Zululand inama local municipalities of 5. Unongoma, Ulundi, Vryheid, Abaqulusi, bese kuba iDumbe noPhongolo. Abantu abakhona kuleyo district cishe ba 1 million nangaphezulu. I-potential district is very huge. It's rural. I'm just making this example because we practically want to come up with strategies that are going to help shift our rural areas. That area, potentially a corner, you can quantify it in terms of its comparative advantages, as it were, but primarily this is what you have. You've got forestry, and the question is, where is the furniture manufacturing facilities? Not only for the forest that exists, but for other forms of trees that can be planted, like your Polonia, etc., which grows for 3 years. Now you're talking rural intentional economic development in the area of forestry. 2, you've got mining, minerals. There is gold, Pongolo, and there is coal, anthracitic, class A coal, Kanongoma, all the way to Vryheid, and you've got iron ore from Melmoth down to Lundi. The question is the ownership of that. We know which minerals are owned by the state, but whoever applies for those minerals must not just come in on the basis of social labor plan and simply say, I'm going to build you what is considered a public good, clinics and hospitals and all that. There must be participation by rural people in the area of mines. Number 3, you've got tourism. Mawehla nje laphaya eBabanang, kwa left, there's a burial sites of 7 Zulu kings, Omalandela, no Zulu, Nabany. That's a mecca of this particular province. Eiffel Tower in Paris, it gets visited upon by 7 million people yearly. You've got that, which needs to be developed to ensure we're talking practical economy and rural economic development. Because when people fly in and come down, they come with leverage of the brand Zulu, so to speak, in that particular area. We're using our own indigenous wisdom to bring in economic activities and develop. Number 4, you've got agriculture in all its facets. That's livestock. For instance, inkomo, imbuzi, ingulube, amatata na konke okunye that you can develop and therefore bring your processing facilities. You can't tell me ukuthi kwana ngoma kusafika itruck esuke eThekwini naseGoli ilethe impuphu. Kodwa khona indawo eziningi ekhona Jozini Dam, and need to develop the infrastructure, as my brother was saying here. Infrastructure in rural areas, it's not really very much developed, especially your roads and dams even. So, and maybe lastly, we do need to look at a lot of other, especially the property. A rural area in terms of property, it's developing on its own. There is no spatial proper planning. But today you've got certain type houses in rural areas. Kodwa impintshena kuhambeki ngoba induni mane yabeka la, hlala la. Now engineers and specialized people, now I'm throwing it back, Miss Facilitator, to us and to everybody here under this leadership of this august institution. Ukuthi kunabantu abafundile from rural areas. I know globalization, what urbanization is a global phenomenon. But we cannot just simple and say, vele people are shifting into urban areas. What about rural areas? Where is the Operation Buyele Kaya as we commemorate Simiso Nkwanyana's values here, who was born a Melmoth? Ukuthi we go back to our rural areas and develop. I believe that is one key solution that we need to bring all of these skilled people who come from rural areas. Abaya ngoba sebeyongcwatshwa, abaya ngoba kunemcimbi kuphela, bengayi ngoba kuyokwenzeka i-development efanele ubeyenzeke. I think that's my few words on that one. But lastly, on women, ngizalwa uMaqwabe nogogo wami manje angase unqaba ematshitshi namajongosi owangikhulisa ngemali yesiqatha. Now, women are amazing people. None of us is here without them. They must be in the forefront of development. Actually, Madam Speaker, I believe maybe we need women to lead this country because they led us anyway. So we may have missed that opportunity, but I think we need women to lead us in this country, and they must be in the forefront of economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. I may not answer properly what has been raised. First, I believe that the question, that's why I made the issue to say, if you are going to address the issue of rural development, it must be a cut across, not a departmental responsibility. Equal, I said, if you are going to address the issue of gender, you should not only look at the Department of Women, people with disability, and so forth. Because you are only managing, not dealing with the problem. Now, I think we have to start to think outside the box. One of the things, for instance, I raised in that life I used to have a speaker was, if you've got a minister of monitoring and evaluation, then how do we have a situation where departments are underspending, but no one is picking up this underspending? How do we, by the way, I had another life, I checked mineral resources for 10 years, and I checked energy for 5 years. One of the things that became the problem was that you get a situation where, I was just making an example that a mining license, just to have a prospecting right, it requires 14 days. And then that 14 days, you'll find that there are prospecting rights that are sitting there for more than 3 years. But the person every 15th of the month get paid. The question I was asking, is it so difficult for the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation to understand there is a problem? Because the moment, I'll come to this one, the moment you unlock that, you are actually creating employment. Because from a prospecting right, it's going to be a mining right or a mining permit. And then you start to employ people. So the starting point when you deal with rural areas is to look at whether issues that relate to those rural areas are taken as a priority or they are secondary. I would say sometimes we prefer to build, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying there's a need for a change of mind. We can build many swimming pools, but very few dams. Now we have to change, there has to be a mind change. And let me say this thing, there will be no change of minds if the educated is not leading. So Unisa must take the lead. It must lead. By the way, the Unisa we're talking about today is not the Unisa that's me, so if we to wake up, we'll realize today. There is a lot of progress, a lot of work that has been done. It's completely different from the Unisa of distant learning. And I think for me, that leadership role that Unisa is giving, it must not look at managing it, it must look at expanding it. And only when Unisa is a part of society, when Unisa is being felt in society, when Unisa begins to make sure that part of its developmental education is that if in some point who may not have gone far at school, is able to find ways and means of surviving in the rural countryside. And unfortunately, we don't want to say the truth. We have got 56% by history, about 56% of women in this country. And the other 44% is produced by women. So the question of leadership of women cannot be questioned. It's not whether women can lead or can't lead. The question is, how do you build confidence, support women? I always say this thing, Prof. But abantu abamhlophe bangalisupport idabilethu ukuthi siwine. Idabi labantu besifazane ngeke zilidwe ngamadoda. They don't have to ask permission from us as men. Their struggle, their fight as women is a just fight that they must be prepared to pursue. Amadoda must support their struggles. Ngengizwe manje kukhulunywa ngo-women empowerment, ngithi who said the man is empowered? You see, it's not automatic that by virtue of being a man. One woman once said in a meeting, they don't participate. He says, if you look at this house, there are 6 women, there are 30 men. And if one woman speaks, you say a few women are speaking. But sometimes having guts to speak is not a sign of intelligence and knowledge. So I'm saying what needs to be done is to affirm, give women space on their own right, but also women must allow themselves to lead. Because in some cases, I always say, we take this responsibility, every agenda in a class society, especially under the social system of capitalism, the agenda of women emancipation is determined by the ruling elite, and the ruling elite, in most cases, it's men. Even when a woman is in power, I always make an example and say, in the United Kingdom, don't forget that the person who suppressed women most was another woman, Margaret Thatcher. So it's not automatic that when you are a woman, you are progressive. It also depends on what culture, social culture, you have been grown in. My last point here is that we should not see women and even people with disability. By the way, some of us have got a serious disability. Ideological and political retardedness. It's better this one, umbona unenkinga yengalo, unenkinga yomlenze. Ukhona abakhubazeke ngengqondo. That their capacity to think can't go beyond what they see in front of them. So the fact that you say somebody with a disability does not mean when you are seeing as physical disability, the most dangerous thing is a disability of the mind. When you can't see beyond what you see in front of you. So we need to make sure that we build a working class that is able to understand its own cause. When Simiso died, he had titled what we call the medium-term vision. The medium-term vision had only one thing: building working class power for its own interest and for its own. Contesting all key sites of power. Not contesting and you contest all key sites of power. Only a conscientized working class will be able to take its center, and you can only mobilize this working class around this momentary interest. So I would say we should not treat women as a strata. We must treat them also within the context of being a class and a class on their own. Thank you.
Colleagues,
I'm sorry I'm not bringing a Marxism lecture.
Director, sorry. I think we need to finish this. I think people need to understand that when we talk about agriculture, we are not excluding people who live in the urban areas. You know, I'm challenging Unisa. You've got agriculture, yours must be unique. Agritourism. Look at the value chain of agriculture connecting Embotimuni with Kwamakuta, Hammersdale with Enchongweni. You know, the person who's living in the urban area does not own a land, but the one in the rural areas is making them to survive through the connection between the rural and the urban. Where is Pick and Pay? When you enter Pick and Pay, close your eyes. What is the percentage of the space in Pick and Pay that has connection to agriculture? 80%. So you live in the rural areas or you live in the urban areas, you can still be part of this economic development, even if you don't own land.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, colleagues. And just to reiterate that component of economic development, but also economic diversification. What I'm hearing, economic diversification. Prof. Puleng, it links so well with the catalytic niche areas. If I think about agro-processing and manufacturing, I'm talking now to the deeds as well, tourism and culture industries, renewable energy, mining-related local enterprises, logistics and transport, digital services, I heard about the AI component, retail and financial services, and lastly, small and medium enterprise development. If we don't look at economic development holistically and inclusively, then economic diversification will not see the light. I would like to conclude our panel discussion tonight by saying Unisa is moving to Unisa Global. It would be remiss of me not to say that. And Unisa Global is there to reach not only our country, but on the continent and globally. I want to say, I don't want to steal NASA's slogan, but a Unisa, an arm's length away. But where we can reach every single student in every rural area, but it will require investment, infrastructure, technology, people, exactly the same than it takes for rural development. So for those unspent funds, Honourable Speaker and the Vice-Chancellor, you're more than welcome to channel them to Unisa. Unisa is led by a woman. and women know how to spend the unspent funds. I love you, I leave you, and give a hand to our esteemed panelists.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Unmute, and just unmute. I don't know which one. Check. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to add to that. I think it was a full and rich engagement. And I love that there were practical possibilities and solutions that were offered. And I hope that we've all heard. We are almost at the end of our evening before dinner is served. And now I would like to invite Dr. Joyce Mieza, who is the KwaZulu-Natal Unisa Regional Center, to come and give the vote of thanks. Please let's give her a round of applause.
Challenged. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity and to our principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, thank you for the warmth and vision of your welcome address this evening. And for the support, we really appreciate that you have given this lecture, and more broadly, the legacy of Simiso Nkwanyana. Your presence and leadership continue to give this occasion its standing on the university calendar. I also like to send our thank you to our Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Mrs. Didiza. We are deeply grateful for the depth and convictions with which you engaged tonight's theme, land as a catalytic for rural economic development in South Africa. Your reflections have given us not only a sharper understanding of the policy terrain, but a renewed sense of agency about the work that remains. That a leader of your stature will set aside time to stand with us this evening is a mark of the esteem in which Simiso Nkwanyana's legacy is held, and we thank you for it. To the Nkwanyana family, thank you for continuing to entrust this university with the memory of your son and brother and husband. So we've enjoyed about 4 lectures at this stage. We thank you for that. To Mr. Siyatokoza Nkwanyana, the National SRC President, to Professor Opa Mashile, to Ms. Liana Grisel Hubert, and our panel discussant, Professor Albert Modi. I did recognize him. We come from UKZN. So, Advocate Sipho Mandula, Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, and Mr. Kukuletu Klaba. Thank you for the caliber of thought and the generosity of time you each brought to this occasion. This lecture is stronger for every voice that shaped it. I may not mention all our colleagues, but there are a number of senior management team in this building. VPs, deans, executive deans, regional directors. I really want to thank you all. I may not just mention you by names, but we really are grateful, including the staff from Pretoria head office, as well as from other regions, as well as from this region. Finally, to the organizing team under the leadership of Professor Boitumelo Sinokwane, Executive Director, Department of Institutional Advancement, our staff, our students, and everyone in this hall, and thank you for joining us, even for those who are joining us online. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and your attention. Please do stay on and join us for dinner as we continue the conversation. As we close this fourth Simiso Nkwanyana Memorial Lecture, let us carry tonight's insights beyond this hall into our research, our policy engagements, and our communities in service of the rural economic transformation this country needs. Travel safely and good night. Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to appreciate all the speakers tonight for the time that they took and the insights that they shared with us tonight. And for that, I'm going to invite our Principal and Vice Chancellor to come to the front and join Ms. Mieza and myself as we offer the tokens of appreciation to our speakers. They are. And as she comes, I would like to invite our keynote speaker for tonight, Honorable Speaker Me Tokodidiza. If you could please come and join us here in front, please. Let's give a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. And Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, if you could come join us, please. Wow, she looked in a Ah, okay. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call Prof. Modi to come and join us, please. Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chancellor and Vamieza.
For Advocate Mantula and for the SRC President, you're local. We're not prejudicing you. So please make sure that you meet Dr. Mieza and Professor Snukwane privately. Thank you very much. So that, as you say, as Professor Sekhalo said, we don't want you to feel as though you're not acknowledged. You are, as well as our facilitator, and therefore we think we will address it. It's a home affairs issue. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Thank you.
Just one, colleagues, I need to take this opportunity. I think you will all agree with me that Professor Sekhalo did an excellent job. As always, let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much, Prof, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mieza. And ladies and gentlemen, no more words to say except to say dinner is served. I think the way that it's going to be organized, Ms. Nako, there's going to be a buffet for people to just go and dish for them.